Good morning, everyone. It is Katie Crysdale here with Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today is Friday, March 19th, 2021, and I'm really excited to invite someone on today who's going to be talking about business lessons from another industry outside of aquatics this morning. So that is going to be coming up in about 17 minutes or so. In the meantime, I want to chat a little bit about what's been going on so far this week with the 2021 POOLaide webinars. So we are now ending week 3. Today is Friday. I know that I'm really looking forward to the weekend. I hope that you are too. We've had some really excellent presenters this week, and I want to give everyone the opportunity to hear a bit of a recap so that they know what's been going on, and maybe they can look to those recordings. They'll be linked in the videos when our recordings go up, and they'll be able to click back and access some of those shows that they might have missed. So starting off the week this week, on Monday, March 15th, we had a session with Jamie Lopes of Aquatic Engineering and Design near Waterloo, Ontario. Jamie and I got connected a number of years ago. He is an aquatic engineer. So he is responsible for putting together the blueprints, the design and construction plans for different aquatic facilities. And what that means is he's literally mapping out where pipes go, where mechanical goes, where walls go, the clearance around the swimming pool basin, everything that is part of building or renovating a commercial public swimming pool. So I invited Jamie on to talk about some of the project gaps that both he and I have encountered in swimming pool projects. So he is involved in pool construction projects across Canada, as am I, and we often see a lot of the same issues at different types of projects. So we're really looking to address those issues that we encounter, and that was the focus of Jamie's session on Monday, was who is responsible for supplying parts, who is responsible for installing parts, having that common language, as well as looking at some key areas that often fall outside of scope or may get forgotten. So something such as water supply, domestic water, storm water, pool or basin finishes, plumbing, electrical, heating. We did a high-level session where he was touching on some of the different work areas that he has experienced shortcuts or difficulties. So that was our session on Monday. And then this past Wednesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, we had this session, Creating Service Magic, with Josh Koch. And Josh Koch is somebody that I've known here in Alberta in aquatics for almost a decade now. I got connected to him when I first moved to northern Alberta. I was working in a small town called Lac-La-Biche. And Lac-La-Biche is about 2.5 hours north of the city of Edmonton, which is the capital of Alberta. And Edmonton was where we would have all of our provincial aquatic manager meetings. So we have an organization here in Alberta called the Alberta Association of Aquatic Professionals, and it's a nonprofit network that allows different aquatic managers, facility staff to really connect outside of conferences. We have a really great Facebook group, and when it's not COVID-19, we actually have in-person meetings. And so I got connected with Josh Koch at one of those meetings, probably within a month or two of moving to Alberta. And he was just a tremendous resource, such a kind person. And for the next couple months, he was often a presenter at some different events that I was at. And I found him to be a really excellent speaker, really engaging. And I hope that came across a little bit in the virtual format of the session that he delivered on Wednesday. It can sometimes be really hard to bring the same enthusiasm to a talk when you're on the screen, as I am this morning. Your bum is glued to a chair. You're not able to walk around. You're not able to cue off the different people in the room. But I found his session on Wednesday really valuable, and I hope you did too. Josh's focus of that session was creating service magic, which is another way of talking about customer service. But he talked about the opportunities that we have to prevent kind of explosion points with our customers to surprise them with resolving any tensions or problems that they're having, as well as understanding the psychographic or like the psychological demographics of the people who are using our facilities. And what are some basic steps that we can take to get started and get inspired and inspire our staff to do better customer service. And I know that he comes from the same perspective that I do as a former lifeguard and an aquatic facility manager. We are all accustomed to doing public relations, intervention, customer service on the deck. And sometimes we just get tired of it because it's a really large portion of our jobs. And sometimes we roll our eyes at those clients or those customers that have the same demands over and over again. But the reality is that customer service, if you can do it well, even in only certain work areas of your facility or only certain team members, it's ultimately going to really help you as a facility and you as a facility manager do better in the long run, because you're going to reduce the number of problems that you're having. So that was the session we had from Josh Koch on Wednesday. It was a longer session, so I know a lot of people will be looking for that recording if they had to jump off after 1 hour. I believe he presented for almost 75 minutes, but it's very important to me as the host of these POOLaide webinars to ensure that we give enough time to our presenters to really dig into the material that they have spent the time preparing. It drives me crazy when I go to an event, whether in person or virtual, and we cut the speaker off because of an arbitrary time limit. And I understand that there are people who do not manage their time well. They don't have their key speaking points. They go down these rabbit trails and they're not focused in their talks. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is if a presentation ends up being 65 minutes instead of 55 minutes, but you as an attendee, you get good value from it, and the presenter is able to, professionally, succinctly convey their information that they're working on day in, day out. That's just life, right? Sometimes we can't deliver the same content in the same time every single time. I know many of you are also instructors or trainers, or you do leadership courses for aquatic staff. And I know even for myself, whether I'm teaching a national lifeguard course, a Life Saving Society instructor course, or even most recently this last year, the certified pool operator course on Zoom, that is a standard course length. So the CPO is 16 hours. There's just some days or some classes or some weeks where I do work to manage my time, but it still ends up being, maybe I lose 15 minutes here, I pick up 15 minutes there. We've all had those days as speakers. So thanks to those of you who are here this morning. I appreciate you being here. It is Friday, March 19th. I'm very excited for the weekend. I hope that you are too. We're going to have a great session today coming up a few minutes after the hour. Do appreciate you spending your Friday with us. Let's go ahead and look at the upcoming sessions next week. Next week will be week 4 of the POOLaide webinars, and we will be finishing the following week, which is week 5. So we are going to have 5 sessions remaining after today. We are only here for 1 month this year, 14 sessions total. And that's just because sometimes things need to be short and sweet and come to an end and be really focused in what we're trying to do. And what I was trying to do this year by bringing back these webinars was providing free professional development opportunities to aquatic professionals who may not have access to the budget dollars or the opportunity to attend a more formal conference setting, and providing those opportunities for those people to, catch these shows live if they can, or catch them in recording form later. So let's chat a little bit about what's coming up next week, the sessions we have next week. I do want to make everyone aware that next week, the 2 sessions that are on Monday and Wednesday, they are going to be at different times. So typically these webinars are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time or 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want everyone to take note if you're registering for next week's sessions on Monday and Wednesday. They are starting at 2 p.m. Mountain or 4 p.m. Eastern based on speaker availability. Now, Click Meeting will show you that at the time of registration. It will update your meeting calendar invitation, but I do want to make you aware that it's not the standard time on Monday and Wednesday next week. So on Monday, we have a session called The Novel Application of a Sweet Technique Using the Artificial Sweetener acesulfame as an Indicator of Urine in Swimming Pools and Hot Tubs. So I know that session sounds like a mouthful, and the person who's delivering the session does have a doctorate in science, but I have met with her and she is young, she's really enthusiastic, she understands that our audience is not necessarily a high level of science, is not necessarily a trained pool operator, and so she is going to do a great job breaking it down into really accessible small chunks. And so I know that if you've ever wondered about is it okay to pee in the pool? She's going to be answering that. Essentially what the session is, if we take away the fancy title, and let me put a link in the chat box for those of you who might consider registering for it, she is going to be looking at the way in which the human body is not able to fully break down the artificial sweeteners that we are consuming in our lives. So whether it is Splenda, whether it is stevia, whether it is aspartame or acesulfame, these are all artificial sweeteners. And what her research, first at the University of Alberta and now at Thompson Rivers University, both located in Western Canada, her research has shown how we as pool operators and facility managers, we can literally look at the urine levels in our swimming pools based on how much undissolved or unoxidized contaminants there are from these sweeteners that people consume in their day-to-day life. So I'm really excited for that session because it's really innovative research that she's doing, and I do believe that she will break it down into very accessible. It's not going to be dry science charts and graphs. She's a really engaging person, and she's done lots of news articles and media sound bites about her research that make it really, really accessible. Coming up on Wednesday next week, we have the session entitled Multicultural Perspectives on Life-Saving in Australia. Let me put the link for this one in the chat box. It will also be at a special time. We're going to be hearing from Ramzi Hussaini in that session next Wednesday. He is located in the province of Victoria, Australia. So he's 18 hours ahead of me, which was part of the challenge in finding a time that wasn't the middle of the night for both of us. Ramzi's story is really incredible. I would encourage you to go to the show notes, which is the link I've put in the chat box, and have a scroll down at some of the videos he's done and some of the media he's done. So Ramzi and his family, they fled from Afghanistan in 2011. They walked overland through parts of Central Asia and then got on boats as refugees to Australia. They got to Australia as refugees. He didn't speak English. He didn't know how to swim. And he was involved in one of the multicultural swimming and water safety integration programs in the province of Victoria in Australia. The Multicultural Swim Program is a long-standing initiative that they have there. So making new Australians, refugees, foreign students understand the realities of water safety and surf in Australia. And he loved swimming. He learned how to swim. He became a swimming instructor. He became a surf lifeguard. He's part of a surf life-saving club. And he's now the multicultural ambassador for that program that he graduated, as well as doing outreach across Australia, making water competency, water safety knowledge relevant to refugee populations, different ethnicities, minorities. He's a really, really wonderful, his story is so impactful and so relevant to a lot of us in Canada and the US with refugee populations, new Canadians, immigrants. I really encourage you to come out and hear Ramzi's story. It's really, really inspiring. And he has some really important perspectives that many of us, our lived experiences are so different from anything that he's been through. It's going to be an excellent session. So we're going to be starting in a minute or two. I will be announcing our presenters shortly. Thank you to those of you who are joining us. It is a Friday. I know Friday you might be crawling through to the weekend as I have been. So definitely I know that you have choices how to spend your Friday, and I'm really excited that you've decided to spend part of it with us. If you can go ahead and put your location in the chat box, it's helpful to our presenter to know where you are from in Canada or the US, just a little bit of geography. I know I ask this every session and some of you get tired of doing it, but it is very helpful to our presenter to see where you're located. So I see Charlene's here from Toronto, Alyssa from Hamilton, Sari's here from Winnipeg, Jason from Minneapolis, Colleen from Portland, Maine. Lots of these places I've been to, and I know Pam has as well. Miranda from Kingston, Angela from Kitchener, Jody from Tucson, Tracy from Charlottesville. Pam is here from London, so also time zones. I'm out here in Okotoks, which is just south of Calgary, Alberta. I see Tanya's here as well. Charlottesville, Virginia, Riverside, California, Tilsonburg. So great representation. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to introduce our presenter and we'll get organized so that she can get started, because I know it's also the end of the workday for her in London and it's, you know, right around that cocktail hour. So we want to make sure that we get on with it as well. So thanks everyone who is here. My name is Katie Crysdale and this is the 2021 POOLaide Webinars. Today is Friday, March 19th. And the session we're looking at today is one that is very near to my heart. This session, as I've titled it, is Business Lessons from Outside of Aquatics. Before I quickly introduce Pam, I want to say how I came up with this topic. The reason I came up with this topic is because in my work as an aquatic consultant, I continue to see many facilities, many aquatic professionals. They are so passionate about what we do that they get so focused on our industry that they lose perspective on other lessons or other skills or other things that they should be considering. So if we zoom out and take a step back, we as aquatic facility managers or programmers or lifeguards, we're working at multi-million-dollar facilities with high-stakes deliverables. You know, we're trying to do swimming lessons for all ages. We're trying to use social media to convey our message. We're responsible for large financial resources in terms of budgets, infrastructure. It's a dynamic team environment with aquatics as part of recreation, maybe part of a municipality, or maybe part of a larger international organization such as YMCA or American Red Cross. And many of our aquatic and recreation professionals, we don't think about these business aspects. We don't think about these business skills. And so I really wanted to bring in someone who can talk about their experience as a professional from a completely different industry, from a completely different perspective. And yet I think you guys are going to find a lot of synergies with your own personal experience, your own personal passion. And I hope that this gets you excited and interested to dig deeper outside of aquatics. And I know we all have very long to-do lists, and we're not trying to add on more TED Talks and more webinars and more books and more, you know, whatever. But I do think opening your ears and your eyes to other industries will start to help you with some of your pain points. That's been my experience as a business owner as well as an aquatic facility manager. So today we're going to be hearing from Pam Wright, who's worked for Adobe, with the software company, for 15 years in 4 different countries. So Canada, the US, Australia, and the UK, across the functions of finance, operations, and business strategy. Currently based in London, England, with her Canadian husband, she loves traveling, cooking, reading books, and working on cool stuff with smart people. Her father passed away unexpectedly when she was 13, and since then, it's been Pam's mission to live each day so that she can look back every night and say that she is proud of what she accomplished and how she treated others. So really excited to welcome Pam Wright. We'll get her to unlock her microphone and camera. Let's give her a big welcome in the chat box.
Can everyone hear me? Or Katie, can you hear me at least? Yes, okay, good, nodding head, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, those of you who, if you haven't been to one of these webinars before, I'm gonna pop off into the chat box. Pam will do her session. At the end, we'll do some question and answer. If you have any questions, you can pop those in the chat box, but it's believe me, as a presenter, it's very dynamic and you can't always incorporate it into what you're saying. So we're not ignoring you. We'll get to questions at the end if they don't fit where she's at in her presentation. And as always, I've pinned in the chat box the location of the information for today's session. So if you want to have a look at any of the slides or you have them open on a separate screen, go to the link that's pinned in the chat box and you can take it away, Pam. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Katie. Okay. Awesome. So, hey, Poolies, thanks so much for having me. I've really been looking forward to this. By the way, I have 2 screens, so I'm trying to manage like camera, chat pod, notes, slides. So if I'm looking around a bit at the beginning as I get used to it, please forgive me. So I hope you're all having an awesome day. Yeah, it's 5 p.m. Friday here, so this is the last thing I'm doing before I can pour a gin and tonic, which I'm super excited about. My session is called Forget About Perfect, Small Changes Make All the Difference. And it's really just like an amalgamation of some of the lessons that I've learned, both from my personal experiences and also my experiences in business. And I hope you can take away something at the end that's useful for you and that you can use in the future. I'll spend a few minutes just introducing myself. Because I'm with you guys who love pools, I wanted to put my favorite pool in the whole world up on my first slide. This is the pool at the Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore. Before the pandemic, I was really lucky to be able to travel both for work and for pleasure. And I got to experience a number of hotel pools, although mostly just looking at them from like the window of a conference room or walking by it in the morning on the way to the office. But this one is my favorite pool. I don't normally get the chance to put up my own photos, so I'm taking advantage of this session, thanks Katie, to kind of like slide some of my own photos in there. Normally I would be showing slides full of like graphs and numbers. As Katie was saying, for the last 15 years, I've been working for a big corporation doing operations and finance roles, which mainly consists of trying to make a whole bunch of complicated stuff easy to understand for executives and shareholders. Despite the fact that she knows my career experience is boring graphs and slides, she did invite me here to talk to you all. So thanks for that, Katie. And thanks everyone for coming along on a Friday morning or afternoon or whatever time it is in the world. So now I need to find the next slide button again. Here we go. Okay. So I work for Adobe, which is the world's second largest software company after Microsoft. We are very proud of that. We only hit that milestone last year. So anybody you know who works for Adobe is going to be like proudly shouting that from the rooftops. If you haven't heard of Adobe, you've probably heard of the technologies we make called Photoshop, Acrobat, and Creative Cloud. Adobe is a really fantastic company. No one ever works for a technology company like me for 15 years, but I find that they truly care about their employees. And every time I start to get bored and think that I want to try something different or work somewhere new, we like make a new product, or they acquire a new company, or they ask me to move to a new country. Again, as Katie was saying, I've worked for Adobe in 4 different countries. So I started in Canada and then moved to the US, then Australia, and now the UK. Today, I am speaking to you from my apartment in London, UK. This is definitely not a photo of my apartment. That's the Queen's apartment, and I'm sure it's way nicer than mine. I'm originally Canadian, and even though I say I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, when I was a kid, my dad had us move around a lot due to his job working in remote weather stations for Environment Canada. We never lived in one place for more than a few years, and I think that that gave me a travel bug in like the worst way. As you can tell, anytime Adobe has approached me to relocate, I've totally just jumped in with both feet. And I've been lucky enough that my husband has been totally supportive, and he's moved like all the way around the world with me. So that's awesome. We've gotten to explore together. Again, Katie, you covered so much in the intro. You're like doubling my intro. So as Katie also highlighted, look, this is sad, but it will help you understand some of the background and some of what makes me me. and why I approach things in a certain way. So when I was 13, my dad died suddenly in a car accident. That event really turned my world upside down. I actually even ended up falling out with my mom, and then I left home as soon as I could, which was only a few years later, around my 16th birthday. So moved out of home really young. I went to live with my boyfriend, now ex-boyfriend, but boyfriend and his family, which looking back now, I kind of realized that we were actually quite poor. I had to get a job right away to help pay the bills, which totally just seemed fair because everybody in the house worked to pay part of the expenses. But I didn't realize at the time like what kind of situation that we were in until I looked back now or later in life. Look, we were all generally still happy people and we had a really good life. So that was kind of the first lesson that I wanted to share with you, or one of the things that has helped form the way that I work and the way that I am, which is that it's still possible to be happy and positive even when things are really tough. Again, this is not me. This is not one of my photos. So even now, I still get feedback at work that I'm relentlessly positive and actually make people feel better or calmer if they walk into a meeting room and they see I'm there, or if they're in a virtual meeting these days and I'm hosting. There's something about a positive attitude that can really spread to the people around you, and I've found that that's really important. It's actually something I'm just going to ask you to keep in your mind for a little while. We're going to talk about it more later. But have you ever noticed that some people are like that, or maybe you yourself are like that on a Friday, and then maybe you're the opposite on a Monday, where maybe like you're more tired and somebody wants to, be peppy and energetic. They're like a Monday person or a morning person, and you're just over it. You don't want to engage. Just pause, keep that in your mind, and we'll come back to it. For now, we're going to go back to the early 2000s, which is during high school. I had to get that job to help pay the bills, which was at McDonald's. For the next 2 years, I worked full-time hours at McDonald's, usually 4 p.m. to midnight during the week, and finishing high school full-time at the same time. So I would go to high school in the morning, 8 a.m., go to all my classes till 3 p.m., do my homework at lunch, go home, change for work, go to McDonald's, work an 8-hour shift, go home, go to sleep, and repeat. At the time, I thought that was fine. I had a lot of energy. I knew I had to help pay the bills, and I was really eager to finish high school strong because I really wanted to go to university. Unfortunately, as soon as I began looking at tuition fees, I knew that it wasn't going to happen for me. A 4-year university degree in Ontario is super expensive. I did, however, manage to scrape together the money for tuition to a graphic design program at a small community college in rural Ontario, and I decided that I would do that instead. I didn't see anybody from Belleville in the chat, but shout out to Loyalist College, Belleville in Prince Edward County. Again, so I'm doing school full-time, I'm doing work full-time. Then for my last semester in college, I got the opportunity to raise my hand and volunteer for an internship in Montreal. I wasn't sure if I would qualify because I didn't have the best grades, shocking, but I raised my hand, and luckily for me, I was actually only one of 2 volunteers in the first place. This was another lesson for me. It taught me that you should just raise your hand and try stuff because you might be one of only a handful of people who are in the game. You never know. And check out all of the delicious poutine I got to eat in Montreal. If you have never been to Montreal or never been to Ottawa, this is a delicious dish, French fries, cheese curds, and gravy. You must try it. So a little setback again. The internship taught me that I was actually really bad at graphic design. I couldn't take feedback properly. I didn't like people having different creative preferences to my own. And I just wasn't very good at it, which maybe you can tell from my slides. So that was okay, rolled with it, but I wanted to stay in Montreal. So again, just had to pay the bills, went and got a telemarketing job. So don't worry, I am also terrible at telemarketing in addition to being terrible at graphic design. I would like call people and get them on the phone and they would be like, oh, it's dinner time. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll hang up. I'll leave you alone. Or they would say, does this product cost any money? And I would be like, oh yeah, sorry, it does. It costs money. So I actually never even made a single sale over 3 weeks. But as they were about to fire me, I had been super nice every day to the receptionist. And little did I know, she was actually the boss's sister. So she stood up for me and she said, look, I think that we should find her something. And then that's how I got into data entry and database administration. Another lesson. This taught me that you should treat everyone with respect always. You never know when adding sunshine into someone's day might just pay off in ways that you totally can't predict. So it turns out I'm actually really good at data entry. I'm really good at typing quickly, I'm very accurate, and I'm very logical. So this led to a temporary data entry contract at Adobe. This is one of my Adobe swag, which I was laughing as Katie was doing her introduction, because this is actually taken in Australia. That session that she was talking about with the Australian lifeguard, that will be super interesting because it is definitely true that in Australia, most kids get into swimming from the time that they're like 2 years old. And then you have lots of immigrants into Australia who have never swam before in their lives. And it's actually a real problem because they have no idea about water safety. So I thought it was so interesting and cool that this guy who came into Australia from another country is now helping other immigrants be safe around water. So I would actually go and see that one. I might register. Okay, so back at Adobe, I kept putting my hand up for projects and I was relentlessly positive. I was kind to everyone. I built a great network. And then eventually I was converted into a full-time role. And I've had the privilege of just growing my career at this company since. Now, the theme of my career at Adobe has been working on interesting problems with smart people across a lot of different areas of the business. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the things that I've learned with you guys. If there are any British people on the call, which I did not see in the chat pod, but they might be horrified at this like personal oversharing. That's a lot of history about me. But I wanted to tell you about myself or spend so much time telling you about myself because it's really important to remember. One of the biggest leadership and life lessons that I've learned so far is that you are not magically two different people once you step into an office building or a community center or wherever your place is of work. You show different sides of yourself to your coworkers versus your family or your friends, but it's still all you. And I like to use a Mobius strip to visualize this. If you don't know what a Mobius strip is, you take like a strip of paper and you kind of twist it and tape it together, and it ends up being that the outside edge of the paper is the same as the inside edge of the paper, which sounds a little bit like hippie concept, but it's true. Like for me, I think the life experiences that I've had, even though some of them have been really challenging and difficult, have made me who I am today in both my personal and my professional life. I'm not like advocating that you need to let your coworkers or your boss in on who your inner self is and all of the tough stuff that you've been through. That's not what I'm saying, but it's more for you to consider for yourself so that you can better understand your motivations, your fears, the way you perceive others, the way that they might perceive you, and the way that you're coming across to people. And then the other important thing that I wanted to talk to you about like your inner self versus your outer self is that if you're not taking care of the person you are, if you're not taking care of your inner self, it will show on the outer edge sooner than you think. So for me personally, that's like, I need to do exercise every day. So it's not crazy, like I'm clearly not the most fit and buff person in the whole world, but If I don't do like 30 minutes of something like a bike ride or a walk, it affects how anxious I get when bad things happen at work, or it affects like how short my fuse is, or just my energy levels. So always keep true to your inner self, and don't forget that both selves are the same. Okay, so another fun photo. This is from another trip. This is me and my husband and my mother-in-law scuba diving at the Great Barrier Reef. And the purpose of including this photo was selfishly so that I could make a bad pun, because I love bad puns. But before we dive in, please do ask some questions in the chat pod. Katie will be monitoring it, as she's already said. Ask me anything for Q&A. You would know by now I'm very open. And if I can't answer it or don't know the answer, then I'm not afraid to just say that. No worries. There are a couple parts of this webinar where you might want a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper to write down some stuff. Okay, hopefully all the pen and pencil hunters are back at camp now, so on with the show. So here's what we're looking to get out of today. I would like you to leave this session with these mottos in your mind. First theme, forget about perfection, the name of the presentation. This is just a good guiding principle in general, because you could literally spin forever and really stress yourself out trying to be totally perfect, and nobody is perfect in anything they do, regardless of what they tell you or how they look on Instagram. But I'm here to talk to you about business concepts. So in business, the 80-20 rule means that you're going to spend 20% of your effort on 80% of the results. And then for the remaining 20% of the results, that's going to cost you another 80% of effort. So how do you apply this in real life? So I have a presentation coming up in 2 weeks, which I'm super stressed about. And that one, I would probably be okay with spending more time and getting that to like the 95%, 99% perfect mark. But that presentation is going to be important for my career, and it's going to be important for getting approval on some of the business things that I want to do right now. If I just had to write an email to someone who was an equal at work, or maybe to my boss, but I knew that he wanted something quickly versus something perfect, I wouldn't spend nearly that much time on it. I would get to the 80% perfect, and then I would get it sent so that some other decision could be made, and so that I wouldn't be a bottleneck. So that's forgetting about perfection. Next one, small changes. So small changes in racing, my example is from racing for this one. The tiniest of adjustments to an athlete's weight or nutrition levels, or to bike tires, or to the frame, or to, if you're into Formula One, like the level of tread on the tires, it can make a huge difference over time to the team or athlete's performance, but probably doesn't make very much difference to a single race. But the way that they think about this in sports is they do changes in a marginal gains kind of way. So they find something to tweak or improve, like maybe a bolt to tighten or a different oil to use. They try that, they check what the results are. If the results are good, they stick with it. If they're not good, they change again. And then they keep doing this iterative process. If you prefer a financial example, we can use the example of compound interest, which I like. So if you look at the lady on the slide here, she started investing at 25, invested $5,000 for 10 years, and then stopped, didn't make any more changes. But she's earning interest on that money for the next 30 years, whereas somebody who starts when she stopped saving, so this guy starts at 35 and then invests $5,000 a year for 30 years, he actually never catches up to her. So that is like, even though compound interest is just tiny, might seem tiny, over time it adds up to a ton. Okay, rolling with the punches, number 3. So Number 3, rolling with the punches. This is a boxing metaphor. I know that sounds obvious, but I have to say it. So this metaphor comes from boxing, where if your opponent throws a punch, you like move and dodge to avoid being hit. It works the same way with pretty much everything in life and business, if you think about it. Life or work can throw you a punch that you're not really expecting. But that happens. Don't worry about it. Just change some stuff and try again. I'm not a big fan of boxing, so I decided to use this other adorable sports photo that I found on the internet. A good non-sports example of rolling with the punches came up for me a few weeks ago. I run a quarterly meeting for my boss and the entire leadership team. We had planned the agenda weeks, if not months, in advance, and I had downloaded like cool, energetic videos to play, funny things to like just give like people a 1-minute break and have a laugh. I had speakers from other parts of the organization coming in. It was going to be so awesome, but then life threw a punch. So something happened and we had to change the entire week to address the surprise, and it was totally different from what I had originally planned. But look, if I had like stuck to my guns and said, I'm not going to change anything, this is what we've planned and this is what we're sticking with, and too bad, I might have gotten punched in the face. So we rolled with the punches. We did what was best for our team and the business in that moment instead. And now I have lots of cool videos to use for the next one. Okay, and finally, keep trying different stuff. So again, just move on, make a small change, observe the results, keep going. You might be thinking that these 4 things all kind of sound like the same concept, and that is totally true. It's really just different ways of thinking about it, and if one of these resonates more for you than another one, and you choose to take that one and apply it to your life, then like that's totally a win for me, and I'm excited to be able to help you along your journey. So now you might be thinking, okay, what are like some practical tips that I can use to apply these things, these concepts? And I am going to share those with you, but first we're going to do a little short exercise. If you're in the mood, do this in the chat pod. If you're not in the mood, that is totally okay. You can use your pen and paper. So we want to write down, what state are you in now? Just take it like a deep breath. And I don't mean geographical state, but what's your state of mind? How are you feeling? You can write it in the chat pod. You can write it on the paper. No worries. A few examples might be, I feel tired. I feel energized. I feel interested. I feel confident. Maybe you feel like you had a big win today. You're happy about that. We've got some answers in the chat pod, which I'll just call out: tired, relieved, and flat. Calm, happy, and tired. Caffeinated, busy, and thankful. Calming down after a stressful week. My goodness, me too. I'm loving the pen nerds. Shout out to my pen nerds in the chat pod. Okay. So that's how we're feeling now. Now let me ask you, how would you be feeling if everything was perfect in your life? So this is what I would describe as your aspirational state. You probably feel empowered. You probably feel like you could climb mountains and conquer the world. Athletes call it flow. Businesses call it high performance. Normal people think of it like that day when you have a ton of energy and just everything is going your way. Like you've done the laundry, you've dropped the kids off, dinner's in the oven, all the invoices are processed, the pool is clean. I don't really know the pool examples, but look, ideally, if you were in your perfect world, what would you be feeling like? So I've got some in the chat pod I'm just going to read out. So maybe you would feel empowered, confident, and intrigued. Your staff would all show up today and you got no customer complaints. That sounds like a pretty good day to me. I would be feeling, if I was in my aspirational state, I would be feeling calm and confident and energetic. I'm not sure if you can feel calm and energetic at the same time, but I like to think I can. All right, so we've talked about how we feel now, and we've talked about how we might feel if everything was going perfectly, which ideally those would be very similar, but they're often not. So I want to talk to you about the concept of strong states. Strong states can be aspirational or negative. So some examples of strong states would be like energized, defeated, confident, tired, interested, or maybe you're just over it. Remember we talked before about that person who walks into a meeting room and they either add energy to the room or they suck it all out of the room like a dementor? That's their state spreading. So that's the concept of a strong state spreading. I'm not really asking for you to like do anything with this information now other than just keep it in your mind, like every time you go into a meeting room or talk to your team, what is your state? Like what state are you spreading at that time? It's also possible to create an environment for yourself that encourages a strong aspirational state. You would be some kind of superhero if you could maintain a strong aspirational state all the time. So don't worry, that's not what this is about at all. But you can certainly make some small changes to help it along, like fertilizing your plants might help them grow if you don't have a black thumb like me, or a little bit of like butter in the pasta water stops the noodles from sticking. It's just something to help create that environment, not an expectation to be perfect all the time. So feeling successful and empowered and in control and calm and energized and whatever other aspirational states you might want to harness for yourself, a lot of the time that's about knowing that you've achieved something. Again, you've ticked off your whole list. You ran 5K. There's no customer complaints. You're at inbox 0. The reports are all done and the laundry is all folded. Something tangible that you can grasp and be like, I accomplished that. So if we break it down, how do we get that feeling? We need to know, 1, what the goal is. 2, we need to know when we got there. 3, we need to know when we didn't get there. 4, we need a reward for when we got there. And 5, we should always try to preserve positivity, grace, and humility. What does that mean? It means that no one likes when you win at Monopoly and then gloat. It's obnoxious. So let's try to stay positive, caring, and have grace and humility. Grace, by the way, is a strong form of power, or like a quiet form of power. When you're graceful, when you're a graceful winner, you don't need others' validation or others to lose for you to feel good. You just know that you've accomplished something great. So how do we know what the goal is? Now, if you guys can just imagine that we're all in a room together, I would normally choose a volunteer and then like set up a chair in the middle of the room. And then I would tell the volunteer, who we can call Pete, to get to the chair. There's your goal. You must get to the chair. Easy, right? How do we know when we get there? Well, it's pretty obvious. You can see it when you get to the chair, especially if we were lucky enough to all be in a room together. So this is a great example of how important it is to set measurable goals. Imagine if there was no chair and I just said, go over there, Pete. Where? Where does he go? How does he know when he got there? I'd have to tell him. But then that's subjective and based on my own opinion, which is not a measurable, solid type of goal setting. Be careful with this type of goal where the result is based on someone else's opinion, including your own. Just as important as knowing when you got to the chair, though, is knowing when you didn't get to the chair. So abandoning the chair example for a minute, this is a piece of goal setting that a lot of people actually neglect or are afraid to talk about because it can be a bit scary to talk about failure. Maybe to use an example, let's say I have a goal to get 100 new customers at Adobe. I probably won't get 100 new customers exactly. It would probably be something a little less or a little more than 100 customers, or I set myself a super lame goal and I get like 200 customers, but I probably won't get the same sense of achievement if I made myself a super easy goal like that. So imagine I get 99 new customers. Did I get to the chair? My goal was 100. How about 85? How about 50? This is the part of goal setting where you need to decide and declare for yourself what does not good enough look like. Nobody can do this for you. You have to decide. I found this part pretty scary at first, but now I'm used to it and I love it. I need to know what the minimum standards are, or what not good enough is, so that I can really know and feel good about what awesome is and how I know I won. And of course, rewards. Again, if we were in a room together, I like to bring a chocolate bar or something and like tell the person to get to the chair and then give them a chocolate bar, which is a good example of how it's important. Because if you set a goal and you achieve it, or say like you smash your goal, like if I set 100 customers as my goal, but I got 200 customers, I need to go big with that celebration. Don't forget to reward yourself. Don't forget to reward your employees or your teams. It's really important to celebrate, like a marathon runner who breaks a record or gets through the line first. Those guys are good at celebrating as soon as they win. So don't forget to celebrate. So maybe the next natural question, though, is then, if you don't make the goal, do you need to come up with some sort of punishment? And the answer is no. The opposite of rewards is consequences, not punishment. In a business environment, what that might mean is that you might be put on a coaching plan or need additional training. Nothing bad, just something to support you so that next time you can get to the goal. The thing that I would say, though, early on, when people are setting minimum standards, they're pretty bad at it. So keep an eye to, was the minimum standard reasonable? Or is this like somebody who said that they wanted to pick up a running training program and then said that they were going to run a marathon in 6 weeks, and the minimum standard was a half marathon? Just not realistic. A good way to manage through this, actually, is to check with a peer or a friend, or many peers, many friends. At work, when I do these exercises with my employees, we actually all get in a room together and we test our minimum standards and awesome results with each other to make sure that we all agree and think that we can get there. And remember, preserve positivity, grace, and humility. Don't gloat. And remember to share your chocolate with your team. Yes, chocolate is a huge motivator. The concept that I'm telling you about now is really like similar to SMART goals. This is another way to, just easy way to remember what I talked about with the chair. Specific, get to that chair, that one. Measurable, get to that chair within 1 minute. Attainable, make sure the chair is not like 10 miles away. Relevant, this one, I struggle with the chair analogy, sorry, but maybe Pete is tired and he needs to sit down. And time bound, get to that chair within 1 minute today. I'm now going to share a tool that you can use. I'll leave this behind. We'll figure out a way to get you an editable version. I call this a clarity template. I use this with my team at work. Here's how you would use it. So at the top, it says, what is your goal? So you would write it here. If my goal is something like, I want to run 5K within less than 30 minutes, I would just write that at the top. What is your goal? Then how will I know whether I achieved my goal? So, and what's important to me? So there's two parts of that goal, right? There's the run 5K, so there's the distance. So how important is the distance to me? There's the time, less than 30 minutes. So how important is the time to me? So I might weight those things 50-50. And then if I wanted to add a third one, maybe I would add with an average heart rate of less than 140 beats per minute. It's really important to not add more than 3 things you're measuring, because if you add more than 3 things, it often can get too complicated. I actually don't even like more than 2 things. You want it to be simple, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. How will you know when you get your goal? Well, for this example, number 1 would be I've run 5K, so that's my distance. Number 2 would be I've run 5K in less than 30 minutes. That's my time. And then 3 would be I managed to run it with less than 140 beats per minute. This is a simple example. Other examples can get more complicated, but for the sake of not taking up the full 2 hours of your Friday, we'll keep it easy. Now, how will I know if I didn't get my goal? So this is the one that is hard for newbies. So again, this is all you. Like, nobody else can tell you when you will see yourself as not having made your goal. So for me, maybe it's I have only managed to run 3K in 45 minutes, and my heart rate is over 160 for the 5K run. I struggled with this at first because I wanted validation from other people that my goals were okay or that they were stretchy enough. It's really ultimately, while you can seek advice and input from your peers and from others who you value their opinion, ultimately this is up to how you will feel at the end. So for me, I actually can't run 5K. So 5K for me is a huge goal. 5K under 30 minutes would be a giant goal, and 5K under 30 minutes with less than 140 heart rate would take a long time for me to get to. Another easy way to think about this is actually we often rate our goals and measures based on a 1 to 10 scale. So a goal that is a 10 of difficulty is almost impossible. A goal that is a 1 is like, okay, you could do that in your sleep. You don't get a reward for a 1 goal. Well, maybe you do, but a little one. I would say early on, like while you're still getting kind of used to this, if your team is new to this, go for goals between like a 5 and a 7. And then as you get more used to it, go for goals between a 6 and an 8 difficulty. Almost never a 9 or a 10. Then at the bottom here are this can be your to-do list. What am I going to do right now or within the next 2 weeks, whatever your timing is, to get me closer to my goal? So for me, this might be, I'm going to download the Couch to 5K app. I'm going to buy a pair of running shoes by a certain date, of course. And I'm going to go for my first run on Monday. I hope this template helps. It really helps me and my team. We find it super valuable. Okay, so we've done our goal setting. Now imagine that we're there. We've set our big goal. We've done our clarity template. But then sometimes it can feel like this trying to get your goal, pushing an absolutely insurmountable rock up a hill. Why does it feel like that? It feels like that because distractions. What are distractions? Distractions are anything that gets in the way of your goal. There are a few different kinds of distractions. I'll teach you about them really quickly. So you can have an obvious distraction, super easy to avoid, like maybe you hear your kid yelling, so put your headphones on so that you can focus. Interesting distraction, these are the ones that I personally find difficult to deal with. I am so interested by my email. That's my biggest distraction. There's a lot of cool stuff in there about new market opportunities or what Adobe customers are using our software for, or speaking opportunities like for Lakeview, Aquatic Consultants. I love my email. If you feel like it, you can put what you think your distraction is in the chat pod. If you don't feel like it, don't worry. Just think about it. What is distracting for you? A credible distraction is like, ooh, I heard about this interesting new project that I want to be into, but it would take away all my time from what I've declared my goals are already. A process distraction is my personal pet peeve of like, well, we have to use this tool that takes us 4 hours to update, and we can't use the other tool, the new tool that only takes 30 minutes to update, because this is the way we've always done it, and this is the tool, and we don't want to change it. An important distraction, this guy is the head of Adobe, so when he's coming to town, I am definitely distracted. Like everything needs to stop and then pivot to preparing for a visit from our CEO. And then a boomerang distraction. Boomerang distractions, Australian influence, they are of your own making. So that's like, maybe you did ignore your kid yelling and now like they're, I don't know, bruised and you feel like a bad parent. Boomerang distractions you do to yourself. So there's a few ways that you can deal with distractions. The most important one is that you have to know, so you have to be self-aware of what are the things that draw you to what I would say low progress behaviors. So what are things that distract you from your goals that you know already? High progress behaviors contribute to your goal. Low progress behaviors mean it doesn't contribute to your goal. I know a low progress behavior for me is checking my email. So when I have a lot of stuff to get done that pushes me along the path of achieving my goals, I try to shut down my email and ignore it as much as possible. You can also map out upcoming distractions and figure out how to deal with them in advance and make time for them. So for example, I know that our CEO is coming to here in September, to Europe in September if things open up again. So I need to make sure that I'm not planning to achieve anything big in September because I already know that I'm going to be devoted to preparing briefings and presentations and stuff for him. You can delegate distractions if you're lucky enough to have a team. Be careful, delegating distractions might mean that you become a distraction for your team member. And ignoring is usually not an effective method of dealing with distractions, but occasionally can work. I would say don't ignore distractions. So just make sure you're keeping an eye on how much time you're spending on your goal, which you've declared and hopefully written down, versus on distractions. Only you can master your distractions. They're very personal. Nobody can do it for you, and it's totally an ongoing battle. It's not a thing that you can just tick a box and say, done, I've ignored that distraction, so I'm perfect, right? Lesson again, nobody's perfect and nothing is perfect. Okay, finally, getting to the end here. So just one more word about busy. Busy is a super tempting state. It's basically just distractions all piled on top of each other. Busy is not making any progress on your goals, and busy is very addictive. When you are busy, you probably have a lot of short-term things to tick off a list, probably none of which, or very few of which, are contributing to your long-term goals. Every time you tick off something on a list or get like a tiny thing done that's, you know, I sent an email or I paid that bill, that's a little dopamine hit in your brain, which your brain just loves, and it'll keep you doing that. So just be self-aware, be aware of distractions, be aware of busyness, and again, nobody's perfect. 80-20 rule. Don't worry about it so much. All right, key takeaways. So, of course, forget about perfect. Small changes. Roll with the punches. You haven't failed. You've learned something. Keep trying different stuff. Don't be afraid to change what isn't working. How can you do that? Set SMART goals with clear win and loss criteria. The clarity template can totally help. Have frequent check-ins on progress and whether your goal still makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, go back to number 2, roll with the punches. You haven't failed, you've learned something, and try something different. Know and manage your distractions and keep track of when you've won. So this can be a form of reward. If you highlight what you've done and achieved together, especially with your team, put it in a newsletter, have a celebration, and definitely put it on your resume for when you're interviewing at other companies. But stay humble. And remember, strong states spread. So that's it, my final picture. Ready for Q&A, Katie?
Great. Can everyone hear me? Let me know, and
Yes.
hopefully you can hear me. Awesome. I love. That's funny. I didn't even know all the Australia photos were coming. I know you lived in Australia, and yet I still sometimes we forget these things. So I wanted to give a little background before we jump into Q&A, because I didn't even explain how I know Pam, and then I thought people were, did I troll LinkedIn? How did this happen? But I've been connected to Pam for almost 15 years now. We met through a variety of circumstances, but connected. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, where Adobe has an office, and we've been kind of partners on food adventures, travel adventures, failed and otherwise. And yeah, I thought Pam would have a lot of perspective to share with those of you here today. So I'm going to comment on some things that Pam said. I first want to start by saying a big thank you to Pam. I know you were a little bit stressed about this session. What can you bring to Pool people? But I think you knocked it out of the park. I have so many, my page has so many takeaways, and I can't be the only one. So anybody else who has questions, please do feel free to pop those in the chat box or comments. I want to start off by saying that I love what you were saying about the result is based on someone else's opinion. And I think this is so relevant for our aquatic and recreation professionals, because the result is often based on the community, council, upper management, other sort of conditions over which we don't actually have any, like, we could say the result is adequate and someone else will say, no, it's not, or it didn't meet my expectations. So how have you juggled that? You're also in a larger corporate structure, big, many levels of management. How do you reconcile, like, you knowing it's enough sometimes and other people saying, no, it's not, go back to the drawing board?
So I actually have this problem a lot in my team. Or I did in my last team, because we run operations for sales, which generally is pretty, it doesn't have firm measurable results generally in the industry. So what we did, we actually sat and brainstormed as a team and tried to come up with, how can we create some measurable things that we say that we did and that we can own and get credit for. And one of the best ideas that I thought was most applicable across roles could be doing a survey. So survey results, like, make sure that you do one at the beginning to get your baseline and level set on what it is today, and then ask the same questions at the end of whatever time period you set, whether it's 6 weeks or a quarter, and then measure the change in opinion or in customer satisfaction scores, or we used to do time spent in meetings. So we used to try to reduce the amount of time that salespeople spent in internal meetings, because salespeople should be meeting with customers.
Right.
And so that's pretty subjective. So you do have to kind of rely on people self-reporting, but at least you have that documented data and a methodology around it.
Well, and I love that example. I think it's so relevant to us in aquatics, because the example I gave in the chat box earlier of a successful day for some people could be no customers barged into my office pre-COVID and complained. There was no email from the mayor asking why this issue was on the rant and rave. There was no, fire, no emergency. That's a day-to-day occurrence for many aquatic professionals. But in defense of how we end up getting stuck in this cycle and how to avoid it, to your point, Pam, about the survey, we don't know how happy our median or most customers are, because we only survey them in programs or only survey them when we have a problem. We don't survey a baseline, like you said, to say, 82% of our customers are generally satisfied, but we don't hear from them because they don't care to tell us, because we haven't solicited that feedback, or we haven't asked, we haven't made it easy for them to provide us that information.
The way that I would translate that example into a high-tech example is customer escalations. So we also get customer escalations. Someone emails the CEO or angrily phones reception. And we do measure that. Like, we measure the number of customer escalations that we get, and we track that. And if it's going up, then that's bad. And if it's going down, then that's great. But I do want to say that I would caution anybody against setting a target of 0 customer escalations, because there's always going to be 1 or 2. There's always going to be some.
Yes. And I loved what you said about, people bringing an energy into a room. I think of it as an energy vampire. It can also be, I heard this is radio DJ talk yesterday, but they were talking about toxic positivity, like somebody who's actually,
Mm,
aggressively being toxic to try and improve the environment, especially now with COVID and people just being really overworked and overwhelmed, and they have a lot of stressors in their life. But I do think, to your point, sometimes customers, it doesn't matter what it is. We are the explosion, as Wednesday's speaker kind of mentioned, the explosion of a collision or pathway of other things. It's got nothing to do with you or the product
mm,
or the circumstance. It's just the straw that broke the camel's back. And those are just going to happen sometimes, unfortunately.
yep.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is what is not good enough, and the Pareto principle, which I love that screen. Those of you who may not have heard of it before, but that 80-20, we in aquatics, we tend to be overachievers, very detail
Mm,
oriented, work on it well past a delivery deadline or well past doneness. And I know when I was talking to you this morning, Pam, I had a situation in the last couple of days where I fired a client because there was a disparity and agreement in what is acceptable, what is reasonable for the amount of time and the cost. And so I'm really, for myself, taking a step back and thinking, okay, what is good enough, and did I articulate that right? And
mm,
they obviously have a different expectation. So how
mm.
do you explain that 80-20 with your team, but without it sounding like you're accepting like lower performance or mediocre?
Mediocre products. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the goal setting helps too. It's like, you know, um, you go through this exercise before you start working of what is going to be an awesome product. I try not to use like minimum viable product, MVP. We try to frame it as what would make you so proud and so happy to achieve, and then what would make you think, oh, I actually didn't achieve my goal. We don't, or at least I prefer not to talk about like what would be the thing that would be make you feel like, oh, I did okay. You know,
Hmm.
we want to shoot for awesome, or we want to know I didn't make it. Um, so setting it up front, setting the criteria up front, and then also just asking the question. I've found it personally with my boss, who I've worked for oh my gosh, almost 7 years. So we work really well together. I just ask him the question like right up front, like what are you expecting, or like what do you want to see from this? What's in your head? So I think it's important to have that upfront conversation, and just like don't be afraid of the answer. It's going to be helpful in the long run.
Yeah. No, that's you're speaking my language, Pam, because that's I'm still doing the post-mortem on my own situation. And I think that's a big piece of it is we're not brain readers. Everybody comes from a different place. So what they expect in the marketplace, let's say in London, it might be different from Calgary or Ontario
Mm,
for the same type of product. And if you don't explicitly nail down those pieces and you make those assumptions, it's terrible, unfortunately.
yeah, and it's not easy. Like I don't mean to make it sound easy. Like my boss is a super A type, like God love him, but he has an ego, and he wants to do everything fast, 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 and he actually would love to do things perfectly. But if I just have that conversation, like what are you expecting, and what would you love to see, and then and then you have the negotiation about the timelines and the and the deliverable, and then I always try to just deliver a little bit more than he's expecting.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing up the negotiation. I had a manager who was temporary, it was only for a few months. She was really excellent. And she was a big believer in setting expectations with the client, whether it's your
Mm,
colleague, your customer, your boss, like, I can do this, I can't do this. And then the negotiation piece, as you mentioned, Pam, just now, was where a lot of people, myself included, realized we were failing because we were just accepting we were accepting the unreasonable expectation, and we didn't counter offer with things like, I can't do that, that's not possible, what about this? But
mm.
because we didn't explicitly say no or why not, then it becomes our burden to fulfill something that we knew from day one we probably couldn't do, even under magical circumstances.
And I think that what you said there, though, is really important. Is offering the counter. So not just saying like, "Oh, there's no way that that can happen," but saying, um, "I don't think that's realistic. But what about this?" or even sometimes I've found a way to say, I don't think that's going to happen. What about this? Without even having to say the I don't think it's going to happen part. Maybe you can say like, that sounds great. What if we did this?
Yeah. Well, and that's that managing up skill that many of us have. If you're an aquatic supervisor, you're probably responding to a recreation manager or a community services director. We are very hierarchical in aquatics. And I know a lot of people can manage down to their team, but they're not accustomed to kind of massaging and flexing up to kind of to negotiate that outcome. And maybe it's because a lot of our industry is female and they're not confident, or they've had certain, acculturation that they're, women should be a certain way. And we don't realize in the workplace that we do need to counteract those instinctive, training or childhood, whatever that's like, but that the negotiation piece is really vital, because if you can't do it, then nobody's going to win. And often you just can't do it, right? We do this on the deck level by disallowing certain behaviors. Now we need to translate it to the management room with bigger projects that have bigger deliverables.
Good example.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Pam? Please pop those in the chat box. I've got a couple of things I wanted to mention, but we're going to be wrapping up shortly if there's nothing from anybody who's in the chat box. So no stupid questions. Do feel free to pop those in.
Ask anything.
Yes, really. So one of the things I'm wondering if you can share, Pam, is I know you said, you signed up for opportunities when they presented themselves. You're very open to trying new things. And so I'm sure you don't have a very specific, clear professional career trajectory, but how do you kind of navigate what you're working on now and still keep an end goal in mind? Because I know a lot of us in aquatics, we don't tend to think past right now.
Well, one of the things that's worked really well for me is always having kind of the next big thing in mind. So I actually don't really know what I'll be working on in 2 months from now, like after my current project finishes up and wraps up. I'm sure it'll be something interesting, but I don't know exactly what it is. So I don't worry about that, because that's kind of related to the day-to-day operations of the business. But what I do say is in 3 years, I would like to relocate again. I would like to go to, and then I would name like 2 countries, like maybe back to the US or to Singapore would be great, so I could swim in my favorite pool again.
And I'll come visit.
Yeah. And so I declare the big thing. And the reason that I think that works is that people can't read your mind, first of all. So no one can read your mind. No one knows what you want unless you tell them. And then if you tell them something that's like a short 1 sentence, I want this in this time period, they kind of, even if they don't think about it all the time, they might think about it if an opportunity like that comes up. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And it's funny, that actually matches exactly something that came up on Wednesday. We ended up doing it on Zoom, but it was supposed to be a Facebook Live with a recruiter. And that video recording is posted on the Facebook page for Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. But one of the things she mentioned was just tell everyone what you're trying to achieve, whether it's family, neighbors, daycare providers, dentists. Have a elevator pitch, couple sentences. I would love to do this, or I would like to do this. And you don't know where it's going to land, the power of the universe, the power of people who love you, appreciate you, and then those kind of the marinating in the back of brains, how that can ultimately end up directing forces and confluence of circumstances to possibly achieving it. I think that's so
Totally.
huge. As well as kind of Oprah style, like articulating what you want is the first step to working on getting it, right?
It's so true.
Right. So, all right. Well, I don't think we have any other questions in the chat box. Let's say thank you so much to Pam Quinn. I know she would love to get on with gin and tonic and starting her weekend. So
you're so funny, Katie. You just called me Pam Quinn.
Oh my God. Sorry.
That's how long Katie and I have known each other.
Pam Wright.
Pre-married name.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So
That's
sorry.
funny.
We'll edit that out.
Don't worry. No, I love my maiden name. You can call me that anytime.
All right. Well, thank you so much to Pam for being here today. We'll say a thank you. You can head out, Pam, without eggs. Right. So remember, exit without ending. I'm going to briefly talk about what's coming up next week for those of you who are still here. I'll also pop a link in the Facebook page. I will pop a link in the chat box to our Facebook page where you can access that video recording that we put up on YouTube. We had some technical issues with Facebook Live, so we ended up doing it as a Zoom, that the recording is on our YouTube channel. Some really good takeaways for any of you looking at career development or shifting jobs right now with COVID. So coming up next week, because today is Friday, it is the end of week 3 of the 2021 POOLaide webinars. So this is the final session for this week. We have 5 remaining sessions this month. So coming up next week on Monday, March 22nd, we do have a session. It's basically looking at pee in the pool, how it's quantified scientifically with different sweeteners. So that is coming up at a different time, just based on speaker availability. It will be at 2 p.m. Mountain, which is 4 p.m. Eastern. And if that time doesn't work for you, it's right after work, school pickups, whatever that looks like, you can look for the recording on YouTube in several weeks. We are a bit behind, but they're still in queue, still downloaded. They will be coming. Coming up on Wednesday, we have the session with Ramzi Husseini, who was the refugee who fled Afghanistan, moved to Australia, and is now a lifeguard, swim instructor, water safety advocate, multiculturalism ambassador for Victoria Lifesaving in Australia. That will also be at a unique time based on the time difference between Calgary, Alberta, and Australia. Then coming up on Friday next week, we are looking at more pool mechanical items. Brent Miller is coming back from Automated Aquatics to talk about pool air quality and ventilation. So those of you struggling with clean air, toxic smelling air, remember that when urine or any other contaminants in our pool water interacts with chlorine, it forms combined chlorine in the water, chloramines in the air. That is what creates that pool smell and creates sometimes dangerous health environments for lifeguards and customers to work in. So Brent is going to be talking about air quality in pools and really breaking it down into an accessible topic for those of you who may not have as much pool operations or building mechanical experience. So it's going to be a very general, high-level introduction to the topic. And if air quality is something that you're struggling with at your facility, definitely recommend coming out to hear him talk, because he's involved in a lot of buildings with air quality improvements, testing. He's involved in a lot of the science. So he's reading up on the journals and the articles of testing that's being done, especially in Europe. He's very, very knowledgeable when it comes to pool mechanical and systems. So that's what's coming up next week. All of the information, as always, you can catch us on social media, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or on our website, lakeviewaquaticconsultants.com. We've got the POOLaide 2021 drop-down menu. So I hope you'll join us for one or some of those sessions coming up next week. If you have any questions, I will be on here for the next few minutes, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Get out, enjoy yourself, forget the pool for a little bit, take a little bit of a break, either buy yourself a coffee or an ice cream. Make sure you take care of you, because I think that really aligns with what Pam said in terms of having, what sort of attitude or what sort of feelings or what sort of motivation are you bringing to work, and your own care, your own self is going to be a part of that. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. Have a great weekend.